Lots going on this front. So we're going to kind of try to move in chronological order here as best we can, starting with NYU professor Scott Galloway's take on CNN that protest is the new sex. Yeah, you heard that right. You heard that right. I don't expect it to make sense right away, but see if he can do a better job explaining it. After all, he is a professor. He gets paid to explain things, so maybe he could do a better job of this than me.
I think there's something bigger going on, Michael. Finally, I think there's something bigger going on, Michael. I think that you have young people who are enraged by the lack of opportunity that they're presented with. I think that protesting is kind of the new, if you will, sex. Young people aren't having as much sex. I know how ridiculous that sounds, but for the species to survive, you have to have young people connecting.
I would say Smirkanish has the look in his eye that, wow, that took a turn. Then again, he always has that look in his eye. That's his default.
This is nothing. This is nothing new. Remember Madeleine Albright? The Bernie women are just there to meet boys.
They're there to meet boys.
They always like to attribute their principles to libido.
Yes, exactly. Let's take it back a little bit.
Young people aren't having as much sex. I know how ridiculous that sounds, but for the species to survive, you have to have young people connecting in terms of romantic opportunities, and also for the species to survive, you get a dopa hit from gathering together and fighting off a perceived enemy. And I think they're erring on the latter.
Yeah, they're having a great time out there. It's all about a dopamine hit, right? That's what it looks like to me. Those kids are out there to get a quick dopamine high. I'm sure all this constant intrusive thoughts of babies buried under rubble and mothers and fathers crying, looking for loved ones, and mass graves of people with their hands tied behind their back. I'm sure that's how they get their dopamine hit, right? This is all a trend. This is all a fad, right? They're out there to have a good time. They're having fun, getting their heads bashed in by the cops, getting doxxed by their employers, having to wear a fucking COVID mask around their face in spring weather now because they don't want people to see who they are. Yeah, no, it's a great time out there. Real party atmosphere. It's like Woodstock. What a fucking moron. And this guy teaches at NYU, so he knows. He's there. He's around, I guess.
Yeah, the tombs are a ball, man. The tombs are like, as soon as you get there, they give you the glow sticks. They got a big disco ball sitting there in the middle of the cell. It's a big rave. It's a big rave there in the prison.
Yeah, you think they're doing this for fun? Really? You think this is what college kids would rather do than have sex? Really?
They literally call Manhattan Central booking the tombs.
Yeah, right.
There's a reason for that. It is cold and lightless in a basement. That's where they take you when you get arrested in Manhattan.
Yep.
If you will. I think they're on the hunt for what I'd call a fake mortal enemy. And the reality is, if you type in to Google anti-Semitism and pick any century in the last 3,000 years, you're going to find multiple instances where the world decides the Jews are the mortal enemy. And then finally...
Wait a minute. Okay, so it's a coincidence. So they just happen to tap into this ancient prejudice, this ancient hatred of Jewish people at the same time that Israel started killing 100 children a day? Like, they're not getting laid. They need something to do, and so they'll go out and they'll bash Jews. Right? This happens throughout history. Nothing curious about the timing of this. Even though, obviously, I don't even have to say anymore to convey the just utter absurdity of that point. As if this is not a response to a specific event. It is not a manifestation of an ancient grudge against Jewish people that all of a sudden sprouted up when Israel started carpet bombing an imprisoned population that they occupy. I mean, this guy gets paid. This is a professor at NYU. This is what I mean. Not only are these institutions of quote unquote higher learning being exposed for their hypocrisy, but their stupidity. Look at the mediocre caliber of human being that gets paid to teach at NYU. A guy that would even think that point is in the realm of believability. He's a moron. He's a fucking idiot.
This is Norm in the book he wrote before October 7th. I'll burn that bridge when I get to it. Talks a lot about that, about how to become an academic with tenure and good standing, you have to have convinced them that you're never going to say anything interesting enough to be controversial.
Right.
That's really the way to get in. Like only the most mediocre minds are able to get through the gauntlet of gaining tenure at a university. And, certainly you see that. Now, Ryan Grimm actually dropped an article. I just took a look at it right before we went on. They just did a poll showing that, unsurprisingly, people who watch cable news are primarily believe that Israel is in the right and is not committing a genocide. Whereas people who get their news other ways overwhelmingly believe that Israel is committing a genocide and a war crime. So that's what this is, man. I mean, cable news is there to platform this kind of thing. But the reason they're scrambling so hard to paint this absolutely absurd picture that college campuses are erupting like Nazi Germany with this overwhelming swell among the wokest generation ever of anti-Semitic virulent hatred against a racial or cultural group. It's absurd on the face of it, but they have to, because what else can they do? Acknowledge that Israel is an apartheid state that represents everything that all these good virtue signaling people of cable news have been telling you that they're against for decades. They have to concede that these students have a point. The last thing they want is to debate them on the merits of Israel commit. They never say on these shows, well, let's ask, is Israel committing a genocide?
Right.
Is Israel committing a war crime? They never take them on the premise. All they can do is smear them and try to rule what they're doing out of bounds and characterize it as being about something that it clearly is not. They have absolutely no evidence for this. Whenever you find incidents of people saying kill the Jews, it turns out that it's provocateurs who are trying to discredit the protesters.
It's interesting because like as the media turned, these campus protests really sort of like sprouted up. Like, what if these encampments started a few weeks ago? Would the media have embraced them? No, they'd have probably done a 180 in accordance with these protests, because they can't cover these protests favorably for reasons that we'll see soon. But let's let him finish here.
This sounds paranoid, but it doesn't mean I'm wrong. The frame through which they view the world is oftentimes or predominantly TikTok. And on TikTok, Michael, there are 52 pro-Hamas videos for every one pro-Israel video. So the frame through which they see the world is, in my opinion, being influenced to sow division and chaos within America and divide young from old.
What he means is 52 anti-genocide videos for everyone, pro-Israel video. That's what he means there. And so again, just what a mediocre person. He's making the rounds. All of a sudden, this guy he's everywhere. He's on Morning Joe. He's on
Turd
Bill Maher.
Blossom.
Yeah, he's on CNN. No, who ever heard of this guy until 2 weeks ago? All of a sudden, he's making the rounds.
I've never heard of him until he started popping up on these shows.
Yeah. Must be because he teaches at NYU.
Well, they had to find somebody shameless enough to say this kind of thing. And he's their guy. He's their guy. They also have to find people who are not only shameless enough to say this kind of thing, but who are not afraid of what the consequences are going to be later for having been a prominent spokesperson for this point of view. A lot of people are trying to stay out of this because, particularly as we were talking with Ryan Long yesterday about, and he made that great video referencing it. I mean, people in entertainment and the culture industry, they are mostly just not saying a fucking word about this, which is disgusting in and of itself, because they can't tell you enough what they think about Drag Time Story Hour. But this shit, they don't want to, they want no part of any of this. So I think they kind of have to scrape the bottom of the barrel to find somebody who's going to make the rounds saying, yeah, no, they're just there to get laid.
Yeah, exactly.
Please clap.